Thank you, April. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for being here today. I'm really excited to give this talk on finding your voice. Now, part of the confusion of a talk on finding your voice is it could mean so many things to so many different people, right? I'm going to start with what finding your voice meant to me when I was about 21 years old. I had been a music major. I was a trained singer for years and years and years. I think I started singing lessons when I was 14, so only 6 years. At any rate, I had severe performance anxiety. I'd gone off to Luther College, don't blame the Lutherans, a completely confident girl from Sioux Falls, South Dakota, and by the time I got into my second year at Luther, I couldn't perform in front of people, but it actually started before then. It started at my Lutheran church when I was a little girl, and I was 12 years old the first time I did a solo, and I learned that my knees were going to quiver while I sang, right? And so then I learned, well, if I wear a dress, nobody can see my knees shaking. Fabulous. And if I put a pew in front of me or some kind of a rail, I can get away with this. So part of me finding my voice was figuring out how to put my voice out to people instead of just saving it for myself. So that's going to be part of the talk today. The other part of that, however, that figuring out what this body energy is about, is also going from thinking of it as nervousness to thinking of it as excitement. Sunday, that's yesterday, right? I sang at my parents' church in Omaha for the first time I've sung at their church in probably 30-some years. I don't get nervous when I'm singing anymore. Not a problem. But nonetheless, my right butt cheek was shaking while I was singing. Like, well, isn't that interesting? The choir can probably see it, but oh well, entertaining. So I decided that must be enthusiasm, because I was super excited to be there. All right, so what is this talk going to be about tonight? I'm going to cover 3 main areas. I am going to cover, got my little pointer, oh, that isn't bright enough, finding your physical voice. Literally, what is your voice? The second section will be finding your message for speaking or for singing. What is it that you are driven to do? And the third area, freeing your voice, is so fine, your anatomy's fine, your voice is working fine. And you know what you want to talk about, but you're totally freaked out about singing or talking about or delivering your message. So that will be the third part of tonight's talk. I hope that touches some bases for why some of you are here. Finding your physical voice. Physiology and anatomy of the voice. Now I'm going to tell you very humbly that I went through college so long ago that they did not teach anatomy of the voice. I did not know that there's just one tube, I mean, technically I knew, that goes from mouth down into lungs, right? And it does split. Part of it goes into stomach, right? We swallow and we breathe out of the same tube at some point. The esophagus closes and it turns into air, it turns into food canal. But I always wondered, and I know I wasn't alone in this, what is that falsetto voice, that Tiny Tim voice, right? Do those guys have like a second little windpipe lower down that they're making that sound? And I know I'm not alone because I'm talking back in like maybe 2000. There were experienced, knowledgeable, really intense voice teachers who could describe falsetto in so many different flavors, as many flavors as Minnesotans have for snow. That's what they had for falsetto, and they made up ideas of how this falsetto sound was made. So there was a push in my field of singing teachers of how the voice is actually set up. How many of you here know what the vocal folds look like when you put a scope down your throat? All right, very soon you're going to know. But we start with this diagram, the actual anatomy of the human body. I get a kick out of this picture because he's got a little pimple there and he's got some funky little nose hair. I thought you'd enjoy that too. So to me, the first most interesting thing is the tongue is this whole thing. If you put your thumb under your chin, you can feel your tongue. Now wiggle your tongue around a little bit and you'll feel it through your thumb. Yeah? If you don't, we got to talk. So if you're from, say, the Russian opera school and you're a bass, you're going to use your tongue to push down on your larynx to get that lower, thicker sound. Not frowned upon in some schools. So this tongue can be used to push down on your larynx to make that thicker sound. The tongue is also interesting because, as you know, we can raise it up here in the middle, and we can raise it on its tip. And these things change our resonance. So later on, you're all going to get a chance to experience your own resonance in a variety of different situations. And then he's got some great teeth. My teeth haven't been that sharp since I was 2 years old. So this is what the voice box looks at from the outside. I'm looking right at you. I'm looking at that. So think of a young man with a big Adam's apple. That's the point that sticks out. And that's the tube that goes down into the lungs. We've only got one setup. Now the next thing we're going to do is we are going to actually see a video of a camera. That blue thing is a camera with a strobe light on it. We're going to see a video of a doctor putting that down a throat. I'm assuming nobody here has had video stroboscopy. Is that correct? All right. So if you're squeamish, might be time to go get a drink of water.
Hi, my name is Dr. from the UC Irvine School of Medicine. One of the tools as ear, nose, and throat surgeons that we use for examination is called a laryngoscopy. It's a procedure where we use a small camera to look inside of your nose and throat. I'd like to use this as an opportunity to explain it to you. The subject of this video is named Ario. He's actually a medical student, and he's going to take over from here.
In order to view your throat and your vocal cords, which are located in the low neck, your doctor will be performing a laryngoscopy. This is an exam where a small scope or camera is passed through the nose and into the throat. The entire exam takes about 1 minute to perform, and it may feel strange, but it is not painful. Your doctor will first treat your nose with a numbing spray to make the passage of the scope through the nose easy. Gently breathe in through the nose after the spray is performed. The spray is bitter tasting and may make the back of the throat feel numb. The effects of the spray last for 10 to 15 minutes and then they go away. The best posture for this exam.
You see that what's on the camera is on the TV.
This allows for the throat to open and allows for the best exam. The scope is passed through your nose and then to the back of your throat. In most cases, the doctor uses a scope with an eyepiece. In this case, we're connecting the scope to the
That's your
screen.
sinuses there in the nose.
3 and 4
Now he's going down the back of the throat.
The first is the epiglottis, and is located between the tongue and the vocal cords. This helps you swallow. There are 2 vocal cords. When breathing in, the vocal cords open, which allows air to pass into the windpipe and to the lungs. When making sound, the vocal cords close and vibrate against each other. The pharynx describes the rest of the throat, and this is the area where food and saliva collect before being swallowed. For patients with certain voice disorders, stroboscopy may be performed. This is where a special light is shined upon the vocal cords to watch them vibrate in slow motion. And we can see that here.
All right. Y'all did really well with that. Nobody went running out of the room, so fabulous. So that's the basic anatomy of the human voice. Aside from the lungs, it goes from about here to about here, and it's 18 centimeters long. There are things that can go wrong with that. You can get nodules on the vocal fold, which are very much like calluses. If you've got a bad cold, he called them vocal cords, vocal folds, it's the same thing. If you have a bad cold in your horse, those whitish vocal folds that were in the middle of the video are going to be pink and raw and swollen, and that's why we can't hear you anymore. Sometimes with aging voice, we get a bowing of the vocal folds where they kind of move apart from each other. And that person, and it's not actually only with aging. I know a man who's 53 who has this. And it makes for kind of a breathy sound and more work to talk. So there are things that can go wrong with the vocal folds. But pretty much everything above the vocal folds on up through the lips, we pretty much have a good handle on. One of the things that can get in the way is acid reflux. If you get acid in this area, it can cause swelling, and it's something to treat, and then the voice improves. When we are using our thickest, strongest voice, those vocal folds are pressing together in a thick, closed way. And when we're using a thin voice, or maybe a breathy voice, the vocal folds are very touching. are barely touching. And that's how we get the different sounds that we make. Okay? Moving on to the acoustics and resonance of human sound. This is where we get to have a little bit of fun making different sounds. Anybody remember him? I'm going to give you a reminder, just in case you don't know who this is. Jim Neighbors. After this commercial break. I'm sorry about that. We thought we'd solve this, but we didn't. Skip ads. It looked like it was a good commercial. Playing.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, if you look at your programs, you'll see that our next performer is Marine Private First Class Gomer Pyle. However, and so, ladies and gentlemen, I am proud to present Marine Private First Class Gomer Pyle. To dream the impossible dream, to fight the unbeatable foe, to bear with unbearable sorrow, to run where the brave dare not go.
I'm going to speak over Gomer for a little bit. I want you to notice the shape of his mouth when he's singing, how he drops his jaw. His lips are sometimes forward a little bit. These are all ways that he produces that incredible resonant sound. Oh, there's a good one. Oh, here we got it. There it is. I'm just going to let it finish. If you can imagine, he's got the roof of his mouth lifted up out of the way, and his tongue is down low. You can feel it in your own mouths, can't you? All right, Gomer, I'm going to stop you there. I'm sorry, I don't even stop you on the tonic. I make you just suffer and imagine the rest of it. So now we all get to try a little bit of this. Does anybody remember what Gomer Pyle, what's his real name? Jim Neighbors. What was Gomer Pyle's catchphrase? Yeah, okay, now do it like Gomer Pyle. Golly, right? Yeah, or something like that. I wasn't even born yet, right? Okay, so Lee, will you give us Gomer Pyle, please? Full voice. The golly thing.
Golly.
Got it, good. Everybody in the room again? Golly. What is your tongue doing when you do that? Oh, it's way up in the back, right? It's cramping up in the middle. Now, say the word river. River. Yeah, like with a lot of R. River. Feel how your tongue bunches up in the back. Now say, Alleluia. Alleluia. That tongue is down and out of the way. So we create different resonances by what we do with our tongue and with our soft palate. If everyone would please, in your best yawn, go, oh, oh. You can all sound like opera singers anytime you want to. Oh, right? That's just the oh taken to a musical place. Now, pretend you're all from New Jersey. Ah, you got, I actually had a student from upstate New York. She wanted to do Handel's Alleluia. And she talked in that voice all the time. It was amazing. It was so mystifying. We did get her, just like him, we got her into that space, but only for singing. So, the point in telling you this is we all have the ability to be any voice character we want to. We can move the shape of our tongue. We can use our lips in different ways. When he's Gomer Pyle, his lips are peeled way back. They're horizontal. His tongue is tense. His jaw is a little tense. And then he goes there, right, to sing. And we can all do that. We all have control over the resonance of our voice. We all have the ability to sing everything from jazz to bluegrass to opera just by changing this. All right. So, this is the literal finding your voice. Moving on, I'd like to talk with you a little bit about finding your message in speaking or singing. This can be very challenging. It has to be something that we are so passionate about that we are willing to get out of the way and deliver the message that we feel that people need to hear. It can be a message about the Chamber of Commerce. It can be a message about God. It can be a message that changes the world that we live in. One person who has a fascinating story about his message and what he's passionate about is Trevor Noah. He has a book called Born a Crime. And because I've listened to that audiobook, I'm going to tell you just a little bit about what I know about Trevor Noah. He was born to a black mother in South Africa. His father was a white European. They were not allowed to be a couple, and so he was raised by a single mom in the black part of the city that he was from. Now, would that be Cape Town, I think? Does that sound right?
Probably.
Yeah.
South Africa.
Yep. So what was amazing about growing up with that skin in his neighborhood was that they all thought he was white. They didn't know what a white person was. So in his book, you hear about how he was treated like royalty. Even his grandfather would have him sit in the back seat of the car because white people don't sit in the front. Isn't that something? So even as a small child, he learned how to be a chameleon through the culture. How else could he have friends? He learned so many, I think he said he had 12 or 13 different languages, and he could speak in each dialect in all those languages, so that whoever was harassing him or wanted to be nice to him, he could be part of their tribe by using his voice and his resonance and his language. He was every man in that city. Now we all know, maybe some of you don't know Trevor Noah, he is the host of The Daily Show. So his message is now delivered through comedy, but his message is to change the world. And he has risen to the top levels of the ability to change the world through your message. Phenomenal, phenomenal man. So I would like to talk with you all a little bit about what message you might have to deliver. Perhaps you feel like, I've delivered my message, I'm retired, I'm done. But you perhaps still have a message of joy or love or giving to give to the people around you. Finding your voice to do that might be meaning to explore a different part of your brain that you haven't explored before. Perhaps you are at the place where you can finally act out of passion. You're done taking care of your kids, you're done taking care of your parents, and it's finally your time to deliver the message that you need to deliver. A little bit later on in the talk, we're going to be talking about getting out of your own way so you can deliver that message. Now, people also struggle with delivering their message through song. What message it is that you are passionate about delivering through song, find that out and you will find a way to deliver it. This is lived out every day by our college voice majors. They grow up knowing, I love to sing, I sing all the time, my mom can't get me to stop singing, I think I'll go to college and become a music major. And they find out that generally college is training them to be performers or teachers. Now, a performer doesn't have to be a singer, but a singer doesn't have to be a performer. You can be so passionate about singing, but not care about wanting to get up on the stage. Or you can love every kind of music equally, and you could never make up your mind which one to sing. You can be somebody like me who came in with a deep education in Karen Carpenter and Elton John, and then you get to Luther College and they teach you to sing Seven Crudele. And like, wait, what's that? I've never heard those sounds before. and it can cause an identity crisis. Eventually, if you're a singer that needs to get a message out, you will find a way to get that message out. If you are a singer who simply needs to entertain, then absolutely you will joyfully head to the stage, and you'll be in the opera, or you'll be in the musical, or you'll be in a variety show, and you will use your voice. You'll be in a band, you'll go to Hollywood, and you'll use your voice to entertain. This is Suzanne Grant. Suzanne Grant was in a punk band called The Enemy in the 1970s and 80s. After the punk band broke up, she discovered a true love of classical music and opera and musical theater, and she became a voice teacher. And she became the voice teacher at Seattle Children's Theater, which is a really highly renowned place. 2 weeks ago, Suzanne Grant and I went to a Thomas Hampson art song concert. She adored that music. But last week, Suzanne Grant did something incredibly brave with her voice. When she was younger, she sang in the punk band, The Enemy, from a place of rage. She has come back now to that place of rage. In Seattle, which is famous for cutting down trees. If you ever visit Seattle, it's bizarrely barren of trees. There's a beautiful 100-plus-year-old magnolia tree that was in a traffic circle over a whole neighborhood, and a developer cut it down. And that drove her crazy. So now Suzanne is a protest singer, as of last week. I love the costume.
Such a lack of light and sound. All that's left is bare muddy ground. A magnificent tree was murdered. The mighty dollar cut it down. There's a hole in the sky where the tree once was. Somebody's making money. There's a hole in the sky where the tree once was. Somebody's making money. Laws protect exceptional trees, but the city grants exemptions to these. Instead they reward the developer's greed and sanction the murderer's deeds. There's a hole in the sky where the tree once was. Somebody's making money. There's a hole in the sky where the tree once was.
Well, somebody's making money. You got the idea. So, whether you agree with her or not, she has found a way to change the world with her voice. Those videos, there's a couple of these. There's one on one of the local news stations. That one's on the Seattle City Council. Have gotten hundreds of thousands of views this week. And the council is going to be forced to make a change, especially if she shows up singing like that month after month. Wow, that's power through singing. There comes a point where we perhaps have to get our egos and ourselves out of the way and let the message that we were destined to deliver finally come out, either through speech or through song. So that leads us to freeing your voice, the mindset for sharing your passion. I struggled with this. Until I was 40-ish, I didn't know what my passion was. I knew that everyone deserved to sing. I knew that singing is part of being human, that it used to be that singing was part of every culture, that people would sing together for social events, people would sing together for worship. It didn't matter if you could sing or not. And in fact, I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that the louder you were, the better, not necessarily the better you were, the better in some cases, right? And so we developed things like belting and show tunes that have to send out to the back of the room, and you get Ethel Merman's voice, which nobody really likes, but it was very effective, right? Because that was the way to communicate with the people before we had microphones and recordings. And then along comes the recording industry. This is my own personal bias. And now you've got Elvis as a role model. Who's going to sound like Elvis? And that went on for a long time, for decades and decades and decades, until we get TV shows like The Voice. And The Voice has actually, and those other shows, have given us a real gift, because I think it's made people realize that people who can sing really well are not the chosen few. When you see those auditions for American Idol where they've got parking lots full of people who are passionate about singing, and all those people sing really well, thousands of people traveling across the country from every city just to get to sing, we start to realize that every small town has really lovely singers in it, people who can really express with their voices beautifully. And even so, Suzanne Grant doesn't sound beautiful, but I sure want to hear what she says. She's got a great message to sing. So that being said, a mindset for sharing your passion has to be that your ego gets out of the way and you become a vehicle for the message to travel through you. If you feel wound up in anxiety, I can't do this, I'm freaking out, my knees are shaking, wear a dress, maybe not for Lee. Get over it. Kilt for Lee. Put a chair in front of you to lean on, and whatever you need to do, to just do it. Now, the second point, when to ignore the left brain, is a really big point. I need to step over and, I'm not going to be able to see it on this display. There is if you want, I'm going to go into this left brain, right brain thing. You all know from pop psychology that we've always credited the left brain and the right brain from doing different things. Studies have shown now, especially on stroke victims and accident victims who've had damage to one side of the brain or the other, that truly the left and the right brain do different things. The left brain tends to do more detail-oriented, fine-tuned, focused in the moment activities. So the left brain, for an example, if you are a bird and there's seeds on the ground, the left brain is going to be making sure that your beak gets to those seeds and that you get a tummy full. But that same bird also needs to have a holistic view, and that is the right brain. The right brain just keeps the fact in mind that I'm going to look out for predators because I'm a little bird and I want to live through today. So that's a tiny little example of left brain, right brain. How this plays out in us, most of us realize that we have two different voices in our heads. We've got the one that tells us we're not good enough. There's more you need to know. You need to research deeper. You need to make sure you dot all your I's and cross all your T's. Make sure you don't deliver that message until you've got it perfect. And always bad self-talk. Like, you probably have a crumb on the side of your mouth, like mine just did to me. Or, are you standing all right? Are your gestures chaotic? Am I in the moment? No. I got the right word or the right note, or if my gestures are right, then I've forgotten my goal. As long as I keep in mind, for me personally, that I want to inspire my audience towards some type of feeling or action, then I will naturally go there. And that is how I find my voice, to talk to people and to sing for people. Suzanne doesn't care in that video for Seattle City Council if she got the notes right. She even paused so she could turn on her little accompaniment track so that she'd be sure that she was getting it right. She didn't care about that. Her goal was to get that city council annoyed and irritated so they would pay attention to her and do something. My goal generally with singing is spiritual. I usually want to take my audience to a different spiritual place. I sing a lot of memorials because that is one of my favorite things to do. I get to help that congregation or audience through an emotional journey. I sing for church services. When I sing for secular things, I tend to pick music that's lofty, with long notes, that make people feel this meditational spirit. That's my choice. That's my vehicle. Trevor Noah, when he speaks, chooses the vehicle of comedy, but his goal is to change the world. If you keep this in mind when you're trying to figure out, okay, I've found my physical voice, it's working right. I've found my message voice, I know what to say. Now, how do I get up there and actually say it? Keep in mind that the bad language in your head won't go away, But if you focus on the bigger goal, that will give you the trajectory to get your message delivered. Regarding the ignore the left brain, there is an NPR interview, The Hidden Brain, 2 halves, I believe, and it's going into this modern science of it. It's not too far off from the pop science, but I can get you that information if anybody wants to email me later. So, this brings us to the point where I would love to hear if any of you have stories about finding your voice or questions about it. Does anyone in here have a burning question about finding your voice? Yes?
Not a question, but at one point in my radio career, I was training volunteers to be on the air, and they'd be nervous, they'd be
Yes.
self-conscious, and I'd say, if you're busy judging yourself while you're doing it, you're doing one job too many.
Judging is a distraction.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Your job is to create this programming,
Yes.
and anything that you're thinking beyond that, in terms of how is it going over, yeah, I mean, you have to check with yourself sometimes. That's part of it. But if you're spending too much time worrying about that, you're not doing your job. You're
It's
doing one job too many.
not only a mental distraction, but it sets up physical tensions, right? If you are able to relax the muscles around your throat, you will have a richer voice. If I tighten up those muscles right around my voice, I get that tighter voice. If I'm in an emotional, shaken state, that's right, it's like, ugh, the throat can be actually cut off. And I have a quick story to tell you about a woman that I worked with this year. Her name is Betty Jean. And Betty Jean took one of my speaking classes. I teach business people how to present and how to speak. And she came with a very quiet voice. And after about 3 sessions of class, she asked if we could have coffee. And in this coffee, she told me that she was raised far away from other people in a large family with a very abusive father. And that raising her voice was guarantee of abuse. So from a very young age, she was taught to be extremely quiet. Now, she had a passionate message to deliver. Through her business, she wanted to help other business people reach their passion so they could change the world. She wanted to be the tool that they needed. So she would teach them how to do paperwork well. And she would teach them how to submit forms for government grants. And she would teach them the right people to talk to get this done. But she was so quiet about it that people wouldn't take her seriously. So she literally did find her voice in that class. She found at the age of 68 that her voice wasn't very strong because she'd never really used it. So she had to start exercising her voice in order to literally be louder. But even harder, she had to stretch herself. Whenever she felt like she just wanted to go back inside, take a deep breath. I could just see her. She'd close her eyes. She'd often grab a chair. And she would say what she needed to say. And for the next 3 or 4 classes, she'd often tear up. But then she started to trust and relax and open up, and the transformation has been amazing. So that's a case where a woman was emotionally bound up enough that her voice was not working. She's found her path, and she can deliver her message better. Yeah. Is there anyone else who has an issue that they know of with somebody finding their voice? Does anyone have, yeah, go ahead.
I was just kind of along that vein, when you have that emotional, and you're in that emotional state, do you have any tips or ideas as far as how to get yourself, bring yourself back around?
Absolutely. It really depends on the person. You have to experiment with a few things. Some people need to be physically overexpressive. They need to be kinesthetically active and may go run a lap or 2 up and down the stairs just to get, like me singing in church yesterday, just to get that extra energy out, right? Here we go. Other people need to go more into that right brain, get out of my own way, this is bigger than I am. And after you've done it a few times, You start to recognize the channel forward. You start to recognize the path that you can take. But it takes practice and it takes courage. Yeah. All right. Well, yeah, go ahead.
How do you control the turning red?
Ah,
People will just turn deep red when they're in front of an audience. How do you turn that up?
right, absolutely. You wear really good makeup. Well, the redness would be blood flow, right? It would be a heightened alert state, which a person should not mistakenly think of as nervousness. It can also be excitement, right? Or, I'm ready, throw me something, you know? And so it is a highly alert state. A person will relax with practice. It'll start to become normal and calm. But believe me, if I'm sitting there relaxed and I am not in the speaker zone and somebody calls and says, Nancy, tell us about your business. I'm like, ah! And I'm going to get a little red in the face. So I would say that's practice. It's just, you want to eliminate as many variables as you can. And if there's too many variables, then we get too much into that flight, what are they all? Yeah, but there's one more now. Too. Freeze, that's it, yeah. We get too much into that if there's too many variables and we just can lock down. So I hope that answers your question. Practice is the, yeah. Practice in intimidating situations. Yeah. All right, well, you now know where to find me. I have 5 books that I've written. One, Singing Through Change, is coming out April 16th. It is Singing Through Change, Women's Voices in Midlife, Menopause, and Beyond. It is a cutting-edge first book ever to look into what happens to women's voices through hormonal shifts through their 40s, 50s, 60s, and beyond.
How long can you sing? Obviously some people sing forever, but
Yeah.
how do you keep that?
How do you keep the singing going? Every woman's voice, every person's voice will change over time. You can hear the difference between, you've heard this before, you can hear the difference between an 8-year-old and a 16-year-old. And a 16-year-old sounds different than a 24-year-old, sounds different than a 40-year-old, and a 60-year-old. So if we have the perception that our voice is stagnant, we're digging a hole for ourselves. We have to be willing to accept that the voice will change. There is, for about 50% of the women, a rocky period on either side of menopause when our voice might do wonky, wobbly things because of the hormone changes. On the other side of that, a woman's voice might be lower and thicker and stronger. Or a woman's voice might be, in rare cases, thinner and lighter and higher. So if that 60-plus-year-old woman plans to still sound like they're 19, they oftentimes set up compensatory muscle tension that does not serve them well. Okay. But if they are willing to accept their changed voice and work with the new voice, then they find the technique that works for that new voice, and they can do it for as long as they want. I'm thinking of Mavis Staples, who's 81 and has an amazing gospel career. She put out a new album last year, and she tours every single week. There are opera singers who do very well, but they have to find new categories. They oftentimes switch to art song, where they can change the keys to fit their new voice. The thing that will get in the way is illness. If you have an illness that messes with your vocal folds, or surgeries that mess with your vocal folds, that can be a deal killer. But if you don't have that, you should be able to keep going. Yeah, yeah, very good. Well, I think we'll stop there. If anyone has any more questions, I'm going to stick around and I'd be happy to answer them. You can always find me on email, and thank you very much for being here this evening. Thank you. Thank you.